Welcome to the Stress Free Dentist Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Block. As always, I want to inspire, entertain, and educate you on the best tools and technologies out there. My goal is to help make your practice and career more profitable, efficient, and most importantly, more enjoyable. And check out all of my nonfiction and children's books on Amazon, and check out the stressfreedentist.com for any upcoming events. And if you're feeling you're a dental professional that's burnt out, or you just feel stuck or want to get to that next level, visit the International Academy of Dental Life Coaches or www.iadlc.com, and we'll get you matched up with a life coach that understands dentistry. I also wanted to thank our amazing sponsor, Equa Marketing. They have helped me and my practice over the years to improve with SEO and website performance. And to find out how you can make your practice dominate in your area, go to www.equa.com/MSMSFD to book your complimentary meeting. Again, that's www.ekwa.com/MSMSFD. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to another episode. And today I'm joined by Debra Engelhardt-Nash. And Debra, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Good to see you again. Last time I saw you was Yankee Dental meeting.
It was Yankee Dental, but then I feel like I stood you up where we were supposed to have our previous first recording of this podcast, but somehow the calendar got messed up. But we're here today, so
here we are.
No harm, no foul.
Yes.
And Debra, like we were chatting about, you and Ross, nothing but great experiences in your institute. I learned so much, and it was really a great experience. I was there before COVID. For the full reconstruction course, and I just learned so much, and I have nothing but good things to say about it.
Thanks.
But first, let's hear about how you even got involved with helping dentists.
Interesting. My education, my degree is in secondary education, and I lived in Seattle, Washington at the time. All the bond issues failed, and when bond issues fail, school bonds don't get gets what happens. Liberal arts school teachers get axed. So I was substitute teaching wherever I could find a gig, and my dentist said, and I think I must have been at my hygiene appointment, and I said something about, "Oh my gosh, this is so frustrating," and he said, "You'd be great in a dental office." And I said, "Isn't dentistry a science?" I mean, I took geology in college because I didn't want to cut a frog. And he said, and he was smart. He was an instructor at the University of Washington. And he said, it is a science. The clinical portion of dentistry is a science. But then there's this whole people portion. And I think you'd be great at that. So he taught me, he gave me a book on dental assisting. He said, read these 5 chapters. Or you're going to do a Myers-Briggs test, tactile skills assessment. And he put me at the chair to learn clinic assisting, and I got my certification, my CDA, and then whatever you think about it, I was either promoted or demoted to the front office, where I really found my passion. I really absolutely loved it. From there, I was recruited by a 4-man group. Back in the day, and I don't think people do it anymore, but do you remember the day of solo group? Where there were 4 solo practitioners, but they shared the facility, they shared supplies, they shared sterilization, but they were individual practices. They shared the reception room, and I managed the 4-man group until one of them decided to branch out and went on his own and said, "Would you come with me?" And he said this to me. He said, "I promise you, if you come with me, I will make you the highest paid office manager / administrator in Seattle. And I also know, Debra, that someday you're going to outgrow my practice and you're going to do something more." And from him, I was recruited by the Pride Institute to be one of their consultants. So I managed Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Northern California. And then in 1985, I decided that I wanted to do it my own way. I wanted to be Frank Sinatra and do it my way, and started my own company in 1985. And there you go, in a nutshell.
And now, would you call yourself a consultant to dentists or dental offices?
I would call myself a consultant to dental teams and to doctors. It's interesting. I would call myself a consultant / coach. Because sometimes what I do is coach. And sometimes, I do anything from coaching the doctor on how to be a better, stronger leader to treatment presentation skills and how to, be a better communicator at the chair. And I coach and consult teams on systems, but also on personal and professional development, once again, with communication skills in the dental office and culture, creating the right culture. I just had this conversation. I spoke in Longboat Key last weekend, and I was talking about team culture and the importance of that. So, and KPIs, I'm analytics I know are critical, but I always say that, culture eats analytics for breakfast. So for me, it's culture first, numbers second.
Let's jump back to the word communication. You had a great quote here that we typically spend about 80% of our time with patients communicating and 15% on the clinical treatment.
Yeah.
It just shows you how important those communication skills are.
I mean, and if you think about it, and in fact, the diagram I typically show in my programs is, if you think about it like a funnel, I come in through some sort of awareness, social media, referral, whatever, Google, obviously number one, typically. People like to challenge that, but still, I think number one. Then I have a phone call. There's a phone call. And then I receive some literature, whether it be downloaded forms and or welcome letter, whether it be snail mail. Then I enter the reception room. I meet the people at the front desk. I meet the treatment coordinator, hygienist, dental assistant. I have an introduction. I have diagnostics. Typically, the last person I meet on the team is the dentist, and the last conversation we have is typically diagnosis, exam, consultation, treatment acceptance, financial arrangements, and then down at the end of the funnel, if I had a little visual aid here, is clinical application. It's way down here. So all this stuff has to go well for me to get this patient down to the end of the funnel. So that is huge for me.
It is so huge. And, if I could go back in time, I used to take so many courses and bone graft and extractions and implants. I would go back and take courses on leadership and communication and public speaking. I feel like those would have just helped me just as much as any clinical course that I could have taken.
I think you're right. I also think there's so many subtle things you could do. I white label for another practice management company, and I don't consult for them, but I do speak for them, and I do their program on treatment presentation, which includes body language and tone of voice and pace, and sometimes people say, it feels or sounds contrived. But once you start understanding the impact that it has, and it becomes very natural. And I catch myself, I did this past weekend, I caught myself and I said, wait, I need to stop myself and ask you, what did you just hear me do? When I was doing a kind of a how you would present treatment to a patient or how you would have a conversation with a patient, I said, you heard me when I become intentional in what I have to say, I lower my voice and I slow my pace. So, one of the things you and I had spoken about was when I'm going to have a conversation with a patient about what insurance will and will not do, that is a very intentional conversation. So I choose my words very carefully, and I change my tone of voice, and I change my pace of play, if you will, for golf referral, so that it becomes important. And I think that, so you're right. I think that most dentists, and I have offered dental schools to come in and teach the third and fourth students communication skills and how to talk to patients and how to present a treatment plan. And they say, well, I'm so sorry, we don't have time. But, I always say it's one thing to know how to do the dentistry, and that's critical. You have to have that. But it's another thing to know how to present it in such a way that the patients want to do it, want to have it, and that we're comfortable talking financial arrangements. And we've got team training so that the team's talking about big cases. And I was doing a team meeting on Zoom with a group out of Victoria, Canada, on Thursday. I didn't spend much beach time when I was in Longboat Key because I was doing meetings and webinars. But one of the things they talked about when I mentioned a big number case, a full mouth reconstruction case, that could be $60,000. They said, we don't have any cases that are greater than $7,000. I'm thinking, is that doctor's philosophy of diagnosis? Is that doctor not, is that his discomfort in treatment presentation and treatment planning? Is that a clinical deficiency or is that a communication deficiency? And it could be both. It could be both.
Yeah, when I first got out and for, several years after I got out into the real world, first of all, in dental school, you talk over the patient. You don't talk, to the patient or with the patient. There's absolutely no communication skills there. And, when I first got out, I was such a nervous wreck and I lacked confidence. It took me a while to build that self-confidence. What would you tell, the young dentist out there that suffers from kind of a similar thing that I did?
That's interesting because oftentimes if there's a young dentist at the Nash Institute taking one of our courses, or if there's a young dentist in my audiences, I will go to them, and not in a challenging way, but sort of in a challenging way. I say, I'm your patient. I'm old enough to be your mother or your grandmother. How are you going to convince me that I should trust you? What are you going to say to me that helps me feel comfortable and confident that you can take good care of me? And I said, and so oftentimes I will coach especially young doctors. And I said this this past weekend, and there was actually a sponsor, a company sponsor. He said, that was brilliant. And I would say, gee, doctor, I'm not buying what you do. I'm not buying your clinical abilities. What I'm buying is why you do it. I'm buying your purpose. So when your purpose is strong, your how becomes easy, your what becomes easy. So why you do. So for me, for my advice to the young doctor is, I would sit with you if you were my patient, and I would say, thank you for giving me the privilege of treating you. And I promise to serve you well. Here's what I want to offer you. And and here's the magic question, whether you be a brand new dentist or an experienced dentist. In one of my workshops I did with Peter Bolden out of Atlanta Dental Spa. He said, Deborah, I wish you would have taught me that question years ago. This would be a question for a young dentist to introduce treatment to a patient, and it works. Ross uses it all the time. And the question is this. To the patient, instead of saying, I'm going to tell you what you need, or here's what you need, I don't buy what I need. I don't care. I don't choose what I need. The question is, Eric, would you allow me to tell you what I'd like to do for you if you gave me carte blanche? If you were my brother, would you allow me to tell you what I'd like to do for you? I have never heard a patient say, no, don't tell me. But I've heard a lot of patients, when I say, I want to tell you what you need, I only want to hear what insurance is going to cover. So that is an open question. So I think that, a young dentist is not going to prove themselves by their clinical aptitude. They're going to prove themselves by saying, this is who I am, and this is why this is why I'm a dentist, and this is how I want to serve you. And would you allow me to tell you what I'd like to do for you?
I'm going to use that. I love that. If I had carte blanche, can I tell you what I can do for you? And that in combination with, we started taking diagnostic wellness scans on new patients, and to show them their scans and show them their teeth in 3D. Is such a great way to increase case acceptance.
Absolutely, it's huge. It's huge. The other thing that happens is, and I say this a lot in my programs. I was just in an office in Scottsdale a couple of weeks ago, and we have a tendency, and I'm not saying you, but you are a dentist, so we have a tendency to assume that it's okay to jump into a patient's mouth. We don't ask permission. We don't ask them how you're feeling about your experience with us so far. We don't have a segue. We walk in, sometimes we walk in, it's a treatment coordinator or a dental assistant, or sometimes we walk in, it's a dental hygienist. We walk in and we jump into their face. And I love it when when we stop a little bit and we say to the patient, tell me how you're feeling about your experience with us so far. Say, oh my gosh, you guys are awesome. I love to hear that. I mean, I mean, and even if you said it at the end, that's obviously the invitation to ask for a Google review. But I think that there's something, especially, and I could be because of my age and now I don't know. Maybe my friends accuse me sometimes of being too informal or too formal, which I totally disagree. I mean, I have minions and chickens and everything around me right now. But I always say, would you allow me to examine you? When was the last time you asked permission?
Mm-hmm.
So for a young dentist to say to me, how would you prefer to be addressed? And someone should have told you already if you're the young dentist. This is Deborah. This is how, she likes this. She likes to be referred to by the Queen of the Nile or, Princess Leia or whatever that may be. And they say, Deborah, thank you so much for trusting me with your care. Would you allow me how are you feeling about your experience with us so far? Would you allow me to proceed with the exam? I mean, that's kind of a Ritz-Carlton next level that is easy to learn.
It's super easy to learn, and anyone can do it, and it's such a great segue to transition.
Instead of open wide. Here's another thing that we have to be careful about. I know you think you're in control of this podcast, and you and I have never done this together, but I got things to say. So. Speaking of that, I'm going to kind of jump into recare because I think it's really important. You have to tell me when we have to quit. I got a flight at 6, so I'm good until 4. So I actually, any strength taken to excess becomes a weakness. So sometimes familiarity with our patients can sometimes be perceived as apathy. So oftentimes when we're talking in hygiene, if you were, let's say you were my patient for a long period of time, and I might say during the morning huddle, oh, I know Eric. He's not interested. He's insurance driven. He knows he needs 2 crowns on the top of his top left side, but he's not interested. He's not going to do them. We've told him for years. If this is going to be a really easy cleaning, he doesn't want to hear about flossing. And we go into our bias of our relationship bias, what we think. Or we almost become, and everybody who says about, okay, engage in relationship and talk about their children and talk about golf and talk about their kids and talk about food, but we could take that to an excess and it really becomes a weakness. And the epitome of this, an example. My former husband, I don't like to call him ex because it sounds like he's icky, and he's not. He's a great guy, and we had a beautiful child together, and he's living happily in Ocean Shores, Washington State. He called me one day, and I know his dentist. His dentist is an exceptional dentist, and I know his dentist in Seattle, and he said, Deborah, I'm going to dispute my recall exam fee, and I'd like you to walk me through some language skills. I was like, okay. Wow, tell me more about that. And he said, well, I said, when you were there, did Don come in the room? He said, yes. And I said, did he have some little instruments in his hands? And was he in your mouth with them? He said, yes. He said, but Deborah, the time that I was there, he asked me about you and Ross and our daughter, Sophie. He asked me about the film I'm working on. He asked me about what it was like living at the beach. He asked me about, my life. And he said, he spent very little time talking to me about my dentistry.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, why am I paying $125 for a social visit? He said it was a social call, not a dental exam. I went, lights, wow, wow, wow. That happens so many times in dental offices where we take that friendliness and that the socialization to another level, to a level where it shouldn't be. And we forget that the patient is there for your clinical expertise. And oftentimes when I ask the question in audiences, why do you think patients say, I only want to have my teeth cleaned? I don't want an exam. And the audience usually will answer, they don't want you to find anything wrong. Or, they don't want, they don't want to take the time. And I totally disagree. It's because they don't see the value in the examination process, because you devalue it by being too informal with your clinical findings.
What would you say is the best transition to go from that initial chit chat, building that relationship to that clinical exam?
Great question. And I think, sometimes that's experience and knowing when, but here is an important question that I think the hygienist needs to ask, especially a patient of record. before the hygienist begins with the muscular motions per minute and before the radiographs and before the diagnostics and the oral cancer screening and the perio charting and bringing up Pearl or Overjet or, artificial intelligence DI diagnostics, they need to look at that patient's record and they need to see if there had been treatment that had been discussed, treatment had been planned but has yet to be scheduled. And before they start, once again, their body language is they're leaning slightly forward. They're not getting things ready. They're not getting their instruments laid out. And they turn to the patient and I would say something like this. I would say, Eric, I see that doctor has recommended treatment for you in the past that has yet to be completed. Tell me what has prevented you from having that done. And I'm not going to say, you need those 2 crowns on the upper left. He's going to probably talk to you about that, that bridge that he's been talking to you about for years. I don't want to, we have a tendency to throw that away, to throw that conversation away. So I think it should be top of the conversation, the side stuff. It can be while we're getting ready, and I'm saying, hey, let me get this taken care of. I mean, the room should be ready when I walk in. I have a client, and it's really great. They have a little sign on the chair, much like a maid service or housekeeping services in a hotel. And you walk into the room, and what is it? There's a little sign, a little tent that says what? This room has been prepared for you by Maria. Mm-hmm. So they have a sign on the chair, and it says, this room has been prepared for you by Kelly. So it's like, wow, this is pretty cool. And they put that up there. And the other reason they put that up on the counter is that patient, even though they may or may not have a name tag, that patient can see that name tag and see that this is Kelly. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the time when they come down and say, wow, last time you were here, you talked about you were taking a 3-week trip to Europe. How did that go? I'd love to spend a little bit of time talking to you about that. How was that? What was your favorite thing? I said, man, I wish I could have more time that I could really learn all about your trip and see all of your pictures. So we might have to schedule some extra time next time you come in.
That's great. And the answer or the question that you had that says, why didn't you get to this treatment? If the answer from the patient is insurance driven, because my annual maximum or my insurance didn't cover it, or I only do 1 crown a year. What do you recommend there when the patient's trying to steer that conversation towards insurance and insurance benefits?
Well, first of all, I coach my offices not to use the word benefits. It's a dental allowance. It's a supplement. It was designed in 1957 to be a dental benefit. And in 1957, when dental insurance was first introduced to the consumer, it was $1,000 maximum allowance per year in 1957. So then it was a benefit. It was a supplement to a medical plan. Now it's a dental allowance. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I would say to the patient, we will do our very best to help you receive whatever dental allowance your employer has provided for you. However, if we wait, it's never going to cover everything. It's not designed to do that. It's no longer designed to do that for you. So one of the things we really need to talk about is waiting for what your insurance will and will not do on an annual basis may compromise the quality of your care, may compromise the results of your treatment, and may put you in clinically put you in harm's way. That's not something that we would ever want to do for our patients. So let's talk about how we could possibly bridge that gap for you. Utilize the allowance, your annual allowance, but at the level that of your treatment. I mean, if we're talking a big case, at the level of your treatment, we will probably not be able to phase it throughout several years to accomplish it all for you, utilizing your allowance. It won't be right. And typically, no matter how we phase it, your allowance will never be designed to cover 100% of your care, ever, no matter how long we wait. It will never be designed to cover 100% of your allowance. And it's diminishing almost daily,
Are you
as we know.
are you seeing more and more dentists reduce their insurance dependence and go out of network?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's becoming, and one of the things I say to the patients, I mean, remember, I'm very sensitive to what the patient sees. The patient's perception is, I have Delta, everybody has Delta, you only have to work with Delta Plan 2000 because that's the only one I have to work with. So I always say to the patient, dental insurance is very confusing, isn't it? There are exceptions and limitations and restrictions almost on in every plan, and the employer makes a decision on what those restrictions will be. So, in our office, we have chosen to offer our patients one standard of care. They would not be dictated by the limitations, restrictions, or exclusions of any particular plan, and that is why we don't participate on a network level with insurance companies. So once again, if a new patient, I get this this question all the time. What do you say to the new patient who calls and says, "Are you in my network?" And I don't want to. I don't want to lie or manipulate them to say, yes, we take your insurance if we are not in network. But I always like to say, you know what? I'd be happy to tell you how we handle insurance. Before I do, may I ask you a few questions? Help me understand how you chose our office for your care. Then I'm going to get into here's how we handle insurance. We will do our very best to help you receive whatever allowance your employer has provided for you. But the doctors made a decision long ago that they would offer their patients one standard of care, irregardless of the exceptions, restrictions, and exclusions of any particular plan. They would not bias themselves based on insurance coverage.
And is it a similar response if it's an existing patient and you've decided, the dentist has decided to go out of network, kind of control the narrative of the conversation, similarly?
Yeah, and I think one of the things we have to, once again, it's got to be it has to be intentional. So many times, but I still go in offices. I know a lot of coaches don't anymore, and it's all done like this. But I still like to go in and observe because I catch things, and not in a negative way. I don't catch people doing the things wrong, but I'll say I hear a lot. I'm sorry, we no longer take your insurance. But what you're basically saying when you're apologizing is that we're doing something wrong. So I say, yes, we have taken that insurance in the past, but we have found that there are so many restrictions that compromise our quality of care that we can no longer participate in an in-network relationship with that plan. Mm-hmm. So we will absolutely, as a courtesy, we will bill your carrier for you to be reimbursed. We'll absolutely take care of that for you. We will adjudicate anything we can. We have no control of what they will and will not deny.
Yep, that's great. Now, earlier in the conversation, you mentioned KPIs and helping dentists with KPIs. What are some critical KPIs or key performance indicators to track?
Great question. Key performance indicators for me would certainly be not how many new patients you acquire per month, but what are you doing with them? So what is your treatment acceptance rate on patients? So, I mean, I don't know, doctors say he said, I attract 35 new patients a month. I think I need 50. And I said, well, why 50? Well, what is your treatment acceptance rate? And he said, I get 100% case acceptance rate. There is no such thing. And it's typically, if you are a average practice, you're performing about 60 to 65% case acceptance rate. If you are a high performing office, you're going to have about an 80% case acceptance rate. So I like to take a look at what is my diagnosis amount, because is that where I need to focus? Am I diagnosing dentistry? If I'm not diagnosing dentistry, there's nothing to do. If I'm diagnosing it and they're not saying yes, so I'm clinically, I feel comfortable and confident that I'm diagnosing appropriately, but now I need to work on my language skills on getting the patients to say yes. So diagnosis rate, what is my diagnosis versus my treatment acceptance rate? The other piece that is, not only do I want to take a look at how many people am I attracting, how many people are leaving. So I often take a look at my attrition rate. So sometimes at the end of the year, we say, okay, you acquired 145 or 200 new patients a month. How many did you lose? So what was your actual growth? Was it really 10% or was it 5% because of attrition? I also like to look at capacity. What capacity do you have? I did a Zoom meeting with a practice in Victoria, and I asked him, how many active patients do you have? And they think they have, and this is a broad. I mean, they don't know, they don't have enough information. This was a broad number. They said we have 25 to 3,500 patients. That's huge. That's $1,000 difference. I mean, 1,000 patient difference. We need to be specific. So they have 2 hygienists working 5 days a week. They see about 7 patients a day. They don't have the capacity to see 85% of 3,500 patients. They can't get them in. Mm-hmm. And why is that important? Because we have a tendency, even though ReCare, our hygiene schedule is full, it could be full of the same people over and over and over. We keep recirculating the same people, and the people who we can't get in, we don't need to get them in anymore because we're full. I mean, and so now we can't get these people in, and these people have restorative needs, and we're not treating them. We're not seeing them. So now we're seeing these people over and over again, and oftentimes we're not introducing them back into their unscheduled treatment. So I like to take a look at capacity. What is my recall return rate? What am I capable of? How many patients of record am I capable of treating in a year? And if it's too low, if it's below 80%, I got to fix it. I got to figure something out.
Now, do you recommend sharing these numbers with the team? And if so,
Absolutely.
what numbers do you recommend sharing?
Great. Yeah. In fact, I was just one of the speakers at this meeting that I attended at Longboat Key Resort in Sarasota was a CPA, and he talked about sharing the numbers as well. And he said, I think it's really critical for your team to have something to have a goal, to have something to strive for. So, once again, I think treatment acceptance rate, I think is collections rate is high. I'm a big fan of, I love bonus plans, but bonus plans should be based on collections, not production. So everybody should know, if you're going to ask me to play the game, I need to know what the rules are. Mm-hmm. And I also need to know how we're going to score. So if you're going to take me bowling, you say, Deborah, we're gonna go bowling. I'm gonna put a sheet over the pins. There's this alley, this wooden alley, and I'm gonna hand you a ball. You're gonna roll it down this alley. And you're gonna hear some noise in the back, behind the sheet. And then I'm gonna ask you some of them may have fallen, some didn't. The ball's gonna come back to you, and I want you to roll it again, and I want you to hit the pins that didn't get knocked down. I have no idea to aim my ball. So the analogy is, if you're going to ask the team to have direction, if you're going to ask the team to be on the same playing field and in the same focus that you have, I need to know where I need to put my focus, and I won't know where to focus my attention if I don't have some of the numbers. Am I going to know the overhead? No, but let's face it, most team members can figure out production and collection. What they may not figure out, unless I'm working at the front desk, is gross production versus net. See, that goes back to that whole insurance thing. Mm-hmm. When you take a look at, here was our gross production, but after insurance write-offs and after adjustments, this was our net production. And I think that's, sometimes when team members get uncomfortable having or needing to talk to the patients about restricting their insurance dependence, I will say, well, let me ask you this. If the doctor came to you and said, I know I'm paying you $40 an hour. However, because our patients, we're taking a 40% cut in our fees, I'm going to ask you to take a 40% cut in your payroll. Would you do it? And what would a team member say? I'd like you to cut your payroll by 40% because we are an insurance-based practice. So so I think it's important for the team to understand. We want to increase our gross and our net productivity, because when my net productivity increases, I can reimburse, I can pay my team more. I can offer more benefits. I can offer more bonuses. I can offer more perks. So I like them, you are I tell teams, you are in direct control of what is available to you in this dental practice based on your commitment, your passion, and your ability and your desire to take risks to help this practice grow.
Now, you mentioned sharing the numbers and bonus plans. What else do you recommend for dental offices? I know they're struggling out there to attract, retain, and motivate
Oh,
team members.
isn't that Isn't that isn't that the case? I think you have to indicate, and doctor just asked me about this on Saturday, and I said it's tough out there. I mean, I wish I say, oh my gosh, I know 27 people in all the states that have not so many. First of all, I'm saying that sometimes we get mired in trying wanting to find somebody with dental experience.
Hmm.
And I understand, in terms of certainly I need certification, as a dental assistant and as a hygienist, I need licensing and certification. If I'm looking for somebody who is a certified dental assistant or registered dental hygienist, I've got to create an environment that is better than most. So I have to promise that we have a culture that's going to make you want to come to work every day. I'm not burned out. It's interesting, an interesting statistic. 71 out of 100 people who go to work every day, don't enjoy it.
Hmm.
That's a lot. So we're going to create an environment, and we don't have a merry-go-round in the reception room, and we're not serving margaritas at the end of the day. Well, maybe we are, but maybe. But we create an environment where you matter. Every day you come to work, you matter. So we create an environment that, I always ask doctors, when was the last time you helped a team member out? When was the last time you sensed that that there's something was going on in their lives? When was the last time you asked them, what more could I do to help you today? I mean, do you really function as a team, and have you created a culture that attracts the right people to you and keeps them there? And that's the critical piece. So I have an office right now that they've got a revolving door. He's a great doctor, but his culture is toxic, and we've got to fix that. The other piece for front office, I say find people who are in a retail industry, people who have been in a customer service business. They understand. I have an office in Vancouver, Washington, and the person they had a person with a lot of dental experience who I can't even tell you the story about how that person drove patients away from that practice. And now they have Steve. And Steve has no dental experience, but he has a lot of customer service experience. And Steve is absolutely amazing. And he doesn't know dental language, but he knows people. He knows how to take care of people. And I said, Steve, if I could clone you, I'd clone you. No dental background whatsoever, but he has a sense of serving. And I think that's the other thing you look for is, do you want to work in an environment where you truly are serving people? And I understand that that we have to pay attention to our productivity per hour, and we have an overhead that we have to meet. But if you once again, if I'm one of your team members and you help me find my purpose, then your practice will become my passion.
That's great. Love it. All right, let's wrap up with two final questions. Number one.
Are we done?
We're wrapping up. Yeah, that went by fast. Let's
Was this helpful? Was this information helpful?
This is you're crushing it. This is great. Great
Okay,
stuff.
Cool.
Two final questions. How do we find out more about what you're up to? And then final question, what advice would you give to the young dentists out there?
Okay. Well, we kind of covered that, but I do have a website, Debra Engelhardt, Debra Engelhardt-Nash, Debra Engelhardt-Nash. I know it's long. I tried to use every letter in the alphabet. I couldn't figure out where to put the Z. So Debra Engelhardt-Nash. You could also call me on my cell phone. I take the call, and I don't have a stripe on my phone to charge you for it. And you can reach me at 704-904-3459. I always think I should say zero because it really is a zero, not an O. So it's 704-904-3459 is my cell phone. You can text me and say, hey, do you have a couple minutes so you can chat? I have a situation I'd love to run by you. Happy to do that. I don't have a meter. So happy to do that. Also, the Nash Institute, National Institute for Dental Learning.com. I do courses with Ross at there. I do also, in June, I'm doing a team communication workshop. It's a day of how do you talk to people? Of course, that will be long gone after when this is aired. So I do team communication workshops and dental business school training at the Nash Institute. The advice for young dentists, and you kind of alluded to this in the beginning when you said, if I had taken more courses on communication when I was young, I would find a Dale Carnegie course or I'm trying, what is that? The course you can go to and learn how to speak.
Toastmasters.
Yes, thank you. I had a little brain lapse there. Yeah, I would tell a young dentist not only would I take a Dale Carnegie course or a Toastmasters course. Toastmasters course, guess what? You go in and you're a young dentist, guess what you're going to meet? Potential new patients in your community.
Yep.
So, and I think when you asked me that, I said, learn how to communicate with your patient. Sit down, learn. There's some great courses, whether or not you are a reader or a listener. My favorite book that I recommend to all young dentists is Simon Sinek, Start With Why.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a great book. I also like a book called If Disney Ran Your Hospital. It's also a wonderful book. And I really like a book that I give to a lot of my clients is a book written by a restaurateur by the name of Danny Meyer.
Mm.
He started Shake Shack, Gramercy Park Tavern, 11 Madison, famous New York restaurateur. And he wrote a book called Setting the Table. And it's really about customer service. It's really not, it's about his restaurant. But if you take some of the principles of establishing these fine dining experiences, you will learn a lot. You will learn a lot. Learn how to speak.
Yeah, that's great. Love it. Debra, thank you so much. It was such a great episode. I really appreciate you joining me.
Great to see you again.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.